Roughly 1800 years ago, the most powerful person in the world wrote a book. Actually, back then it was only his journal, but today it is considered one of the great books of world wisdom. Known simply as Meditations, the Emperor of the Roman Empire, Marcus Aurelius, for 10 years wrote most mornings about the challenges he was to face and how he intended to approach them through the lens of his stoic philosophy. For generations since, millions have found a bit of themselves in the reflections of Marcus Aurelius, and being that he was the Emperor of Rome, make the problems all the more relatable. For if the most powerful person in the world might experience such difficulties, why not I? Join us as we present our 4th annual celebration of the philosopher king, Marcus Aurelius.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Open Door Philosophy. Returning from the Roman underworld of finals week, I'm Taylor Jones.
Basking in the field of Elysium with other great heroes made immortal by the gods, I am Andrew, also known as Guest 178024, the only true Latin on this podcast.
And chilling with my patron goddess of wisdom, craft, and war, Minerva, or as I like to call her, Athena. I'm Derek Parsons, and welcome to episode 84, where we dive unapologetically into the world of Marcus Aurelius. But first, Queragis.
Okay, I think things are going well, although it's the dog days of summer, so what is not well? Yeah. I think at this point.
Oh, this is not the dog days of summer. This is like the puppy days of summer.
Well, my dogs are very tired. They've been sleeping for the past month straight, basically.
I thought you were talking about your feet. Okay, continue.
Yeah. So that's nice. I am writing letters of recommendation right now, which is a whole sort of evil. That's evil prescribed by the gods of the underworld. What's up with y'all?
You don't like writing those?
Yeah.
It's a bit of a labor, isn't it?
Well, it's good on one hand because it's like I'm honored, and I would really like to do my best to and I like I said, I'm honored to do it, and I'm happy to do it. But it's just like you kind of have to strategize. Like, how can I really highlight this kid?
Yeah, yeah. It takes a good hour for me anyway. By the way, it was my honor to write letters of recommendation for both of you. Cheers. Seems to have worked out okay.
Did you write me one?
I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. I know I wrote one for Taylor, though.
Yeah, Parsons and Finley.
Oh, that's a good combo.
It's a good combo. Good combo. Yeah. Taylor, you're alive. Look at you.
I am alive.
Yes.
I'm surprised.
How you doing?
Oh, much better. Oh my gosh. I thought finals week was going to relax a little bit because I had less things. It did not relax. And I think I was working legitimately the whole week from Sunday to Thursday, straight. But we're here. I wrote, oh my gosh, I tallied it up and I wrote probably 10,000 words of essays, over that much within the last week or two of the school year because I had so many essays due. And then I had typed finals that showed the word count. And I was like, I did not just write. One of my finals, I think I wrote over 3,000 words in 2 hours.
In 2 hours?
Yes. Because I was just... Yeah. Oh, I got my class ring. Let me show you.
Nice.
Well, let's see it. Let's see it. People on the listening to the podcast, they will not be able to see it, but...
Oh, wow.
That's super look nice. At that.
Except it's wrong.
It's wrong?
What do you mean?
Yes. So it has the BU on it. But it's supposed to have the Baylor seal. So Balfour is remaking my ring, and they're sending me a mailing, a bubble mailer or something to send this ring back. And they're going to send me the correct ring. Because apparently this is a thing they do all the time, is they mess up people's class rings.
Then they fix it for free.
Yes.
But it takes them 8 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently the lady, I'm copied on the email chain, and the Baylor lady that's in charge of it was please expedite her ring. Get it here ASAP. So hopefully they've already started working on it. And I'll get the package, send it back, and get it in 2 weeks.
Well, congrats. And 1 year left, right?
Mm-hmm. I graduate
Yeah.
next spring.
Crazy.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, it's time for a cruel summer.
Yeah. I've been reading
Yeah.
a lot. I already finished a whole book. Well, I had started it, but I think I read like 200 to 300 pages since I've been home, and I started another one. So
Nice.
Yeah,
we're
my
here.
most prolific reading time is the like 3 or 4 weeks after school gets out for the summer.
Yeah.
I just rip through some books. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I get that.
Yep.
Good for you. Very happy for you. You know, fun story. When I was in high school and a stud, I played soccer.
Yes, you did.
And, you know, with that flowing mullet and wispy mustache of mine. But my class ring, of course, had a soccer ball on it. But when I got my class ring, it had a volleyball on it.
Oh no.
So I had to send it back. And, you know, this was the days of snail mail.
Oh my
So
gosh.
anyway, yeah, it can't. Yeah, I mean, it came back like twice. It came back wrong. I don't know. It just wasn't. It just didn't
Was
happen.
it
Anyway,
valuable?
I got my actual class ring the way it was supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
like 6 weeks before I graduated high school. I'm like, well, that was a waste. Anyway, but I still have it. It had the proper ball on it.
That's cool. Yeah.
That is cool.
Andrew, how long before summer for you? It's got to be close.
I'm 3 weeks away.
3 weeks. Oh wow.
Last week of May. I guess it's 2.5 weeks now.
Oh yes, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not too shabby. How are you doing?
Oh, you know, I'm fine. No, I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, finals are wrapping up for us. Last day with students is about a week and a half. But then,
Wow.
you know, I'm a very important person, so my contract doesn't end till mid-June, which is sad, but that's okay. But you know, I got to have the cool tie. You know, if you got to work more in the summer if you want a cool title. So
Oh, cool title. I thought you said
Yeah.
tie.
no,
I thought you
no,
brought
I
back
haven't.
the ties.
I haven't brought back the ties. I haven't worn ties since October
You
or
announced it.
something.
You announced
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
Anyway, no, I'm doing good. What should I say? Everything's good. I don't know. Everything's
good.
good. Yeah.
IB exams went well.
I don't know.
Um,
Yeah.
Your kid?
That's the beauty of my new job. No, they've gone well. I've had almost nothing to do with them though, which is really weird. Really
That's
That
good.
is weird.
Yeah. Yeah, but no, everything's good. Everyone's good.
Good.
Well, let's see here. What's next?
Let's talk about our next episode real quick. It's
Yeah.
going to be a special one with guest Christian Miller, who's going to be coming on our podcast. So super excited about that. Glad he's able to come on.
Yeah, everyone check that out. So Christian Miller is a ethicist, is a virtue ethicist, I believe. He might correct me on that. But have some very influential books out there. Probably the best known is The Character Gap, which I don't know, 10 years, 12 years ago. Really great book. He's continued to publish since then. He's at Wake Forest. Yeah, look him up. He's out there, and he's going to be on our podcast. The episode after this one should be really great. So we're going to talk a lot about virtue and good and bad and how good people are and in actuality versus what we think. And yeah, should be a good time.
Yeah, and I guess while we're on this point, we should talk about our newsletter too, because if you were on our newsletter, you would have found out that we would have had Christian Miller planned a long time ago. That and other perks, you can find out more behind the scenes information if you go to our newsletter. Link in the description. Sign up there. You'll find about everything that's upcoming on the podcast in the next month, plus some extra little tidbits.
Yeah. And I think I'm in charge. I'm writing the one for June. So, you know,
You
promised spicy takes from me.
That's great.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I have a joke maybe to lead us into this. Yeah,
Let's do it.
I don't know if it's not a funny joke, but it's not a nice joke either. But if we
Then what
and
is it? We could talk about definitions here.
well, it's kind of a mean joke. It's kind of a mean
Oh,
joke. It's not.
okay.
It's not poised at any. It's not poised at anybody in particular. But
Okay.
it's I just thought of the joke. Well, I didn't think of the joke. I heard the joke and I want to say the joke, but I need some way to connect it. But it's a good joke. I think it's funny.
We're all waiting, man. Lay it on us.
Okay.
I'm on the edge
So-
of my seat.
Yeah, so I think this joke, well, I'll figure it out afterwards. So, what do you call a cow with 3 legs? Lean beef. Okay, what do you call
Oh.
what do you call a cow with no legs?
Ground beef.
Ground beef. What do you call a cow with 2 legs? Your mom. So the first
Is it mom joke on our podcast?
Wait,
That's a
I
first,
thought
ladies
this
and
was
gentlemen.
going to be in Marcus Aurelius.
Well, I'll connect it in a second.
Okay.
I'll connect it. But I learned that joke from a monk. Isn't that funny?
A monk?
That's a monk.
Your mom.
The joke is by Father Augustine Wetta, who's a monk in St. Louis Abbey, and he's also an alumni of Rice and Oxford. He's a funny guy who's voted the second funniest guy in Houston one year.
We need to get him on the pod, man.
I'd love to have him on. He wrote a book
Oh my
called
gosh.
Humility. He wrote a book called Humility Rules. The Rules for Humility, and he says it's the best book ever written.
This guy's a real joker.
Yeah, he is. He is.
That's funny.
Anyways,
Oh man.
so
Okay, yes.
connection with Stoicism.
Make this tie in here for us.
Well,
Andrew.
I don't really know how to tie it in. I just thought it was funny. But
Would Marcus Aurelius think it was funny?
yeah. Well, I think there's 2 things we can talk about there. The first one is, what would you do if someone said that joke to you, and you took it seriously? Would you let it roll off?
Yeah. That's if we took it seriously, right?
Second thing,
Okay.
though, and I think we can actually connect this probably in a better way, is that Stoicism is like all about virtues. And I think one of the virtues I think that Marcus Aurelius might touch on, but definitely the other Stoics touch on too, is the importance of good humor. And so what's the difference between good humor and just being cruel? And that's kind of a thing with all of the virtues, that Stoicism, and I think this might be a flavor of the episode today, that we see, particularly Meditations does not do well, is define these kind of virtues and give them to us straight or really clearly cut what they are. So that's my best attempt to connect it.
That's good. I thought you were going to say Meditations doesn't do a good job at humor.
There's some funny parts. Think about my death often. Who would want to do that?
But I guess, thinking about your death, if you're literally on the battlefront, you kind of have to.
You got to be making some dark jokes if you're thinking about death all the time.
Yeah. I don't know.
Let's say this. So, for anyone who's unfamiliar, Marcus Aurelius was an emperor in the 2nd century, the emperor of Rome, and wrote a book called Meditations. Well, not really, as I said in my intro. The book today that we know of as Meditations was his journals that he wrote for roughly 10 years, largely while he was out on military campaign. And it's considered one of the great books of wisdom. And that's where most people stop. The type of philosophy that he employed was called Stoicism, and we've talked a lot about that on this show, but not in some time actually. And anyway, that's what we're going to talk about today. Marcus Aurelius has had, I think, in all 3 of our lives at some point, some significant meaning. Andrew and Taylor, a couple of weeks ago, I listened to our very first episode. And
us together, or just you and I?
Just you and I, like 4 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, Andrew, a couple takeaways. One, my audio was really bad.
It was mine.
I'm like, this is not even listenable. So anyone who goes back and listens to our first episode, I apologize. The audio is terrible. But the second thing, we'll save all this for the 100th episode. But you and I were very concerned about this podcast being something that was going to be practical for people's lives. Like we said it, I don't know, like 40 times in the 30 minutes, man. And but the other observation, which we did not say but was obvious, is that you and I, we were high on some stoicism.
Yeah, we were.
We were loving some stoicism back then.
Wait, y'all started the podcast during COVID?
Yeah, just after it.
Just after
or it's very late. Yeah. So it was January of 2020. No, 2021. Yeah,
we were.
So we had our first vaccines at that point.
No, I didn't. I mean, I got mine in February, I think, of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah. So basically, but I mean, the podcast was planned in an era not only where we that's a good observation, Taylor. That's right. Like it and both go together, I think, for both of us. Like we were products of stoicism, I think, because of the time period. That was why I first read it, and I think that's why you might have been reading it then too. It was like, okay, well, we need to turn to something now, or this is a book that we haven't gotten around to, and this book offers us some really practical advice for the moments that we're living in. And so I think that was a time when we needed that kind of practical wisdom in a time that was very confusing. And so it does not surprise me at all that we were like that.
Yeah. It's really fun to listen to. So I think let's do this. So it's obviously 4-ish years later for us. Taylor also has had some dealings with meditation. So let's talk about maybe how we first encountered meditations, and then maybe where we are at today with our relationship with that book and Marcus Aurelius. Does that make sense?
I guess I'll finish since I just kind of gave my introduction to it.
Yeah, you did kind of do that. Okay, well, go ahead, Taylor.
Okay. I first encountered Marcus Aurelius in the Meditations, like most things, in Mr. Parsons' class, in his just like intro level philosophy class in high school. And then we used that a lot throughout the year as practical wisdom. I think I mentioned this on the podcast before, but one of the meditations that Mr. Parsons always brought up was 2.1, where it's like, tell yourself today the people I encounter will be meddling and divisive and whatever he says, just like unpleasant. However, people go together like gnashing teeth and legs and arms, and all members of a community are useful.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a continued interaction. And I think even since being in college, he sent me that a couple of times. Like, remember, Meditations 2.1 and all. Okay. But I just...
Okay, Marcus.
Yeah. In the spring, got a copy of Meditations, like a physical copy of it from my school's chapter of Alexander Hamilton Society. And I've read through the first couple of books. But I haven't had a whole lot of time to read more.
Yeah, that's cool. Geez, I don't even really know what my origin story is with that book. Let's see. I taught world history for years, and like when I was in my 20s, if you can imagine. As you teach that course, a lot of that course, because it covers all of world history in 1 year, is, you identify great men and women in history, and you say a little something about them and move on. So every time we covered Rome, I'm like, I didn't even know what I was saying. I didn't know who Marcus Aurelius was. I'm like, Marcus Aurelius, he was one of the 5 good emperors, and he wrote a book called Meditations, which is really important. And then we move on. So I'd always heard of it, and I was intrigued by it, but I don't think I began reading it until I was interested in philosophy some years later. I don't know when I first read it. Since I've read it, I'm sure I read it in 2020, but maybe in 2019 as well. I've read it 4 times now, and I've read one other translation twice, which is the Waterfield. So maybe I've read it 4 times in total. I know I've read the Hayes translation 3 times. I've found it really fascinating, and I even started writing commentary on it one time. So anyway, that's my origin story with it. Let's talk a bit about where we are at with it now, which might be interesting. It might not be interesting. Let's just see. Andrew, where are you at these days with old Marcus?
Well, I just pulled up some old text from us because I was curious. I don't have all of them. Yeah. But so in October, I think we had met in person or something of a sort of 2020. And I sent you a message that said, let me know when you finish meditation so we can talk about it. And you said, yeah. And then you said at the beginning of November that you finished. And then I asked you how you liked it. And you said, well, like most philosophy, there were some things I liked and some things I disagreed with.
What an assessment.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I think that, where am I at with this now? I still have, I mean, it's not like it's been 40 years, but the copy that I have, the first time I read through it, I marked through it a lot. I flipped through it occasionally. I haven't read it more than once, cover to cover. I've loaned it out a few times, but it's something that I come back to occasionally. It's kind of like an old friend that I'll come back to, where I think I've moved on from it, but it's nice to reminisce and get some wisdom from it when I need it. And I remember some particular places where it's helped me in the past, and that I can, if I need it, then I can find it. Kind of something like that. It inspired, I think, for me, a lot of interest in virtue. And so because of that, I think I've been kind of off exploring other things for a while, which I think is similar for you, but I don't want to say anything here. So that's kind of my relationship with it now.
Okay, let's pass it over to Taylor.
I kind of touched on this. I haven't read it cover to cover. I would like to at some point, like maybe in the fall, because I left my copy at school. It's on, I believe it's on the shelf with like my school philosophy books, so like next to my copy of the Republic and the Ethics. But there are a couple places, like 2.1 I go back to a lot, but I think Andrew was saying it kind of serves as like a text that he returns to occasionally for advice, and I think the Tao Te Ching is like that for me in some capacities, where it's like what got me interested in that sort of philosophy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, I think about it fairly often.
Yeah, I do too, surprisingly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. He gives such good advice that I'd like to read through all of it and like all of his, meditations.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the draws to the book, right? Is that it is such practical advice. Depending on where you're at in your headspace when you read that thing. I mean, you may read it and the meditations be like, someone has pulled the curtains back and the light is shining in, and you finally get it. It's very straightforward. It's very practical. It's not hard to read. It's easy to return to because there's no narrative. It's filled with just a bunch of his journal entries that are all disconnected from the next one, and very similar to, say, Tao Te Ching, right, which is just 81 poems, or like the Psalms and Bible. It's just 120 something poems, and so it's real easy to get back into. Right? Or it's real easy to just reference quickly. That doesn't answer my question, however, though, what my relationship is. So the thing I think I've really enjoyed about meditations and my entry into a larger philosophical world is that it also helped me kind of get into what was going on in Rome at the time as I studied it more, right?
Yeah.
And then by extension, what was going on in Greece, because the Greeks, influenced the Romans, and then we start talking about virtue, and then all of a sudden we're at Aristotle and back at Plato. And so that's something I really enjoyed about it. When Robin Waterfield's annotated translation came out, that was also really an enjoyable read. I'd read Meditations twice at that point, but had no commentary on it really. And his annotations really brought to life a lot of Marcus's writings. And so today, like I said, Andrew, we were like really high on some Stoicism 4 years ago. I think I've kind of moved on from that. I find a great deal of Stoic practice and philosophy to be very good. It's a lot of good advice for how a person should live their life, I think. And that's even seen today as how like cognitive behavioral therapy is essentially Stoicism. So clearly it's good stuff. But after that, and I think maybe like you, Andrew, I read many of the other Stoics. So Seneca, Epictetus, and then some of the lesser known Stoics, Rusticus. And that just continued to expand the world. But all those are very different. I don't know. I'm kind of like you, Andrew. Like, I'll pick it up every now and then and read some passages, and I'm like, that's good stuff, But, as far as like maybe living my life according to Stoicism or something, I think I lean towards virtue ethics as far as a moral framework of some kind, which has to do with Stoicism, but I don't know. Don't really know what I'm saying at this point.
That's great. Yeah, I think I think this definitely got me interested in Rome and by that Greece as well. And so that's what supercharged my whole interest in the classics. That not really my interest, but made me want to study that in more depth, so I can relate to this with you. So, question for you guys:
Yeah.
Is this book philosophy? I feel like we ask this question every year.
Is this book philosophy? It's a great question.
There's some parts about it which are philosophy, and some parts which are not.
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
No, I was just quoting. Never mind. Okay.
What is it, philosophy? I don't know. I'd say it's wisdom literature. You've compared it to Psalms, and like, I think it's also similar to Ecclesiastes in that it's just like it is answering how to live a good life, but I don't know if you could fully call it philosophy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Because I don't think it gives enough of a framework to really be philosophy. But it's not valuable because it's not.
Well, I think this is how we went down that rabbit hole last year on wisdom, the infamous wisdom traditions episode, right?
Yeah.
So is it philosophy? Oh, I guess it kind of depends on how you define philosophy, which is its own problem. But it's certainly filled with what is considered wisdom, right? I think if you want to go from a sort of analytic perspective, it's not philosophy because Marcus doesn't argue for anything. He just says what he believes. And that's that. So there's no syllogisms, there's no arguments, there's no justification really of anything. There's probably some justification in there, but it's very minor. Not at all like, say, Epictetus or especially Epictetus, who did argue for his points. So I wouldn't call it philosophy from that particular perspective. It is philosophical in that it addresses many questions of existence, right? We're all going to die. How do I approach that? You know, we all live in communities with different types of people. What should we do about that? So it certainly deals with a great deal of existential questions, not existentialist questions, but existential questions of experience. And so in that way, I think it's philosophical, but I don't know if you'd call it, especially by the standards, you know, that colleges today identify as philosophy. I don't know. What do you think, Andrew?
Well, it does make arguments in several places. I think an example of that might be this 2.1 passage. Why are people ugly and brutish and short? You know, I'm not quoting directly there, but and then he gives an argument there, like these people don't recognize, but whatever. And he makes these in several places, right? Yeah, and so he makes arguments in places, but I think what we're putting our finger on here is that there's no central framework for like a philosophical system in here. And that's not surprising, as we've said many times, because it's not an intentional book of philosophy. And so why would he have done that? I mean, it would be silly for you to do that in your journal.
Yeah, and that's the thing. He wasn't intending to do that, right?
Yeah.
Like he's journaling to himself, and we happen to somehow end up with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in light of this, should we recommend this to our listeners as a good entry point to philosophy, or a good entry point to Stoicism, and I guess philosophy in that same stroke? Is this a good place to start for that?
For philosophical study, probably not, because we've kind of touched on how he doesn't really give a framework or explain what Stoic theory is. But for practical wisdom and personal, I don't know, like expanding your personal knowledge or like considerations of things, I think it is very readable. And it's a good entry point in that regard of like gaining practical wisdom.
My answer is yes. And for a variety of reasons, it's accessible.
Yeah.
And it's captivating. And I mean, what are you going to do? Like someone's like, I'm interested in philosophy. You're like, oh, well, yeah, here's Immanuel Kant's, what's a good Kant book?
Metaphysics
Critique of Pure
Morals?
Reason.
Oh.
Give this a whirl. They're not, they'll read 2 pages and they're like, well, done with philosophy. And so, we can't start there, on
Yeah.
day 1 of philosophy and philosophy class. I mean, if I hit them with some Hobbes or something, they'll be like, oh, peace out. So in that way, I think it's something that you could recommend as a starting place for philosophy. And I get that, there's not a lot of context and framework and all that stuff to what he says, but the things that he says is philosophical. And if that book captures the imagination of the reader, they will hopefully continue to look into like, okay, well, what is Stoicism? Or maybe they do pick up the Waterfield book. And so now they're reading an annotated version, which just explains so much more. And it just goes from there. So I do think when we're introducing people to philosophy, it's important the books that we recommend them. And there's a lot of great secondary books to recommend, of course. Many, many great authors right now are writing in philosophy, accessible works. But as far as like the real deal, that's 2,000 years old or 1,800. I think it's a good place to start. I know there's some arguments against that. People are like, oh, Stoic purists. They're like, oh, he doesn't talk theory or anything. But I mean, would you stick with it if you started with Epictetus or Seneca? I don't know. Some would, but anyway, that's my argument. Yeah. What do you think, Andrew?
We're both proofs that it does help people get interested in Stoicism. But I mean, it's true in one sense. I think that the writing style is both personal and mentorly in a way that I don't know if I've seen from another book of its time.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Why is this a good book? Well, that assumes the question. Why is this book? Does this book have any Stoic theory in it? I mean, yeah. It does.
Yeah,
we can say that it doesn't. Is it explicit? Does it build the central framework around it? No. But what it does, I think, particularly well is it allows one to cultivate on difficult soil, break the ground so that a seed may be planted. Why? Because it makes you ask tough questions about yourself. And what is philosophy other than that?
You bet.
Because once the tough questions start, it's like a snowball rolling down a hill. It's like you said, I don't know if there's books better than, or I don't know if certain books will. Now, are those books for some people? Absolutely. But your name needs to be like Sheldon Cooper to figure those books out, the first time. I don't know if that's true or not. But also, if you are maybe... Just to take the other side for a second, maybe you are someone who's had a lot of experience with philosophy. I'd still recommend the book, but maybe you can jump to Epictetus if you just want to get to like the nitty and gritties of Stoicism.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Also, just a piece of literature that's, I mean, in the English, it's not in the English language, but it's of the human language, and so maybe worth checking out if you're interested.
There really are, from a literature standpoint, there really are some beautiful passages in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it's definitely worth reading.
I'm a really, stoke the fire here. I'm a great books person. Sorry, contemporary people. I see your point, and I think it's a good point. But I also think the great books are important. And
what's the point of? Sorry, I don't want to sidetrack us. No,
you're good. You're good. I just think this is one of the great books. And I get it. It's biased. It's Western. It's Latin.
It's Greek.
I get all the. It's Greek. I get all those. I'll get all those arguments. But I think there's something to the great books, and and this is one of them. What were you going to say, Andrew? Let's get off track.
No, I was wondering what their argument is about the contemporary books, but it's not important.
Okay. Maybe we should do an episode on that one day.
No, I don't get the arguments. I don't know. Maybe, let's talk about it sometime.
Do you know the arguments or you don't get the arguments?
I think maybe it's both. Okay. I've heard some arguments.
Yeah.
Maybe they haven't been presented well.
Focus on contemporary philosophy over the great books?
Well, especially in literature, we're gonna push Shakespeare out of the classroom because kids can't relate to it anymore.
What?
So we need to. I love that
Like,
reaction.
yeah, when has a kid ever responded well to Shakespeare?
Yeah, we're not going to read John Steinbeck. We need to read, something that's current and that kids can relate to, which
Shakespeare
is important.
relatable.
But well, if you got a good
Well, like-
teacher, yeah, Shakespeare
Well,
is
yes,
relatable.
if someone can explain it to you. But like he
Yeah,
gives very human situations.
yeah.
And so
The
did
dumbing down of America.
yeah. And like Jane Eyre,
Boom.
I mean it's a classic, but Charlotte Bronte delves into the human condition.
Yeah. Like people should read, Tale of Two Cities. They just should. You're better for it. People should
Yeah.
read the Iliad. Okay, we're just going to go off
As
on
long
this.
as every
But-
copy of Pride and Prejudice is burned and destroyed.
Come on.
It's not my cup of tea, but I can see why people like it.
That's funny.
And they
Anyway,
capture, human things. Like the things that Marcus Aurelius talks about, not all of them, like we're not all going to go to war and be generals or emperors.
right.
But we're going to have to deal with difficult people. And it helps to know that this acclaimed Roman general and emperor dealt with difficult people too. And said,
Yeah.
you just have to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very relatable. I think that's why it's one of the great books. That's very relatable. Y'all want to do quotes? Should we move on to quotes?
Yeah, let's do these quotes real quick.
Okay. Oh, let me get my book. Hang on. This is my clean copy of Meditations because I always keep a clean copy in case I need to make copies for other people. Sorry. That's copyright issues. And here's
What if you're not selling it?
as long as I'm not selling it. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Marcus would be happy. He'd be like, yes. Okay, so we're going to talk about a couple quotes here, some of our favorite quotes. But this time, since it's our 4th episode, we've done some maybe a little lesser known quotes. So mine is from Book 11, verse 18, Part 9. Let me look it up here. There's this philosophical writing style that is called aphorisms. That's not necessarily specific to philosophy, but some philosophy is written aphoristically. Some of Marcus Aurelius's stuff can be thought of in that way. So this particular one, again, it's 11:18:9. It's a whole paragraph, but this first half of the sentence is aphoristic to me, and I'm like, this is good just to think about. It says that kindness is invincible. That kindness is invincible, provided that it's sincere, not ironic, or an act. And it goes on, it says, what can even the most vicious person do if you keep treating him with kindness and gently and set him straight and et cetera, et cetera. So he is kind of arguing for that a little bit. But that quote, that kindness is invincible, I try to keep that in the forefront of my mind when I'm dealing with people who aren't necessarily in the frame of mind to return kindness, let's say. And that, with standard stoic philosophy, I can't control how that person is reacting. What I can control is myself. And I will endeavor to be kind. But I like this particular word. It's invincible, right? Like, and I suppose we could.
Feels very tough.
It does, I'm sure we can argue about that, that it's invincible. Maybe you could say kindness is largely successful, or something. But I like how powerful he states that. And it's just one I've never really talked about before. So I wanted to bring it up. I don't know. What do you guys think of kindness being invincible?
I like the idea. Oh,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Andrew.
No, I was going to echo probably what you'll say. So
Okay. I think it's a good idea. And maybe it's not 100% true that, like, there might be some times when kindness fails, but that doesn't mean it should stop any of us from acting kindly and doing kind things just for the sake of being kind. When you come across people that are meddling and inflammatory and just working against the common good, it doesn't mean you should not be kind, because it still does have some inherent purpose to it and an inherent good about it.
Yeah. A virtue, I suppose.
Yeah.
yeah, the virtue of humor. No, This one kind of relates to my quote too, and I'll give
Okay.
my commentary on it afterwards. But my quote comes from Book 7, Part 4, which is focus on what is said when you speak, and on what results from each action. Know what the one aims at and what the other means. Something that I was just realizing today when I was reading through these things is that each of these things together is, or pretty much everyone, maybe not all, but most of them, I think, are quite impossible for us to do all the time. All the time. They're quite impossible.
Yeah.
So why does he put them down? Well, because they make us better. They orient us. What's one of the problems with Stoicism? And that's evident here. Well, it's maybe the fact that it relies on the virtues too much, and it doesn't rely on. I don't know if this is fleshed out in later Stoic writing, but it's fleshed out in Thomas Aquinas quite well, actually, which I think is a criticism of Stoicism. That is, it's right and good and all of these dandy things, but at the end of the day, human virtues are human, and will we ever reach this level of the good? Thomas Aquinas, what is it? The summa bonum, the highest good. No. No. But the virtues in these little aphorisms, they are helpful to make us realize that there's something greater than ourselves that we can never attain or perfect or.
Yeah. And something to aim for, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
we're and I think this is why we have a book like Meditations. Was Marcus Aurelius a saint? I'm sure he struggled with these things, and that's why he's writing about them. And if you read Meditations, there are like, I don't know, 10, 12 recurring themes over and over and over again. He's telling himself the same thing over and over. And that's because you're right, Andrew. It's virtues are wonderful. Can you embody them 24/7? Oof, it's a high bar. Doesn't mean a bar we don't strive for. But yeah, I think that's why Marcus writes about these things over and over.
What Andrew was saying reminded me of Aristotle in the Ethics, how he says about reaching the highest good, and it requires all of this cultivation, and we don't know that humans actually can get there. And he talks about like the philosophical framework of how to get there, but then Marcus gives some more on the ground advice of like, okay, here's these virtues that we have talked about, philosophical tradition talks about, but like, how do you do that? What do you do when you're in this situation or that situation? And I like that he also says like, this person gave me this advice and I look up to this person for this. And it shows that like he was this great figure, but he still did need this advice that he's writing down.
Yeah, Taylor, that's a great point you made. It reminds me of something funny that I heard the other day about Aristotle, which is like, think if Aristotle put the trolley car problem in the Ethics or something like that. There's no moral dilemmas in the Ethics at all. And it's like, why is that? Why is that? And the answer is that the virtuous man or woman or person is not going to struggle with them. They're not going to struggle with them. But the problem is, Aristotle, is that nobody's ever going to be this virtuous man or woman or person.
Yeah.
And so it's just it's silly. It really is silly. It's I don't know, but it's like you say, it's something to attain to. It's a mark, and maybe that's a problem for Marcus because he's not perfect. He's not completely virtuous, but he's still giving advice.
Yeah.
Well, it is. There's a little quote here from 2.5, book 2. He says, and you'll recognize this immediately, Andrew. Concentrate every minute like you're a Roman, like a man, on doing what's in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness, tenderly, willingly, with justice, and on freeing yourself from all other distractions. And here's the part I like. Yes, you can. He's like trying to convince himself. He's like, yes, you can. And I think that's the struggle. I think that's the struggle of just being human is constantly having to say like, yes, you can, because you're going to not do it one particular day. We're always a work in progress. And I think that's a feature of being human, is that we're never finished. And I think that's why Marcus, says things like that, like, remember, buddy, today you can do it,
Yeah. You have so few things to worry about. Just think about the things that matter.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway. Well, Taylor, what's yours? What's your quote?
My quote is from 3.4, and he says, "Don't waste the rest of your time worrying about other people, unless it affects the common good. It'll keep you from doing anything useful. You'll be too preoccupied with what so-and-so is doing and why and what they're saying and what they're thinking and what they're up to and all the other things that throw you off and keep you from focusing on your own mind." And he talks a lot, like, I think maybe the ones that stand out to me the most are when he's like, don't worry about all of the dumb things going on around you because they really don't mean anything unless it's actually hurting somebody. If it's hurting somebody, do something about that. But if it's not, just people are going to people. They're going to say dumb things and they're going to be annoying and they're going to be rude. And you just don't need to worry about that. That is not your business. Just go about your own business. Worry about yourself. Worry about what you can control. And if you can't control it, there's no reason to worry about it.
Yeah, and it's not in this passage, but I can't remember where, but there's also, from time to time, he's also like, and remember, buddy, you're going to be the one who acts rudely to someone tomorrow.
That's right.
So keep that in mind. Like right now you're, oh, people are being so mean to me. What's wrong with them?
Yeah.
But you're going to turn around and do the same thing the next day.
But let me say, there's a pretty cool book that I found out. It's like the religious version of Marcus Aurelius. It's written by the saint. He's a 20th century saint, Saint Jose Maria Escriva. It's called The Way. It's a fantastic book. Just like I don't know if it was inspired, to be honest, but very, very similar. It's 999 aphorisms that deal with very similar topics. Very, very similar topics. It's a cool book. So if anybody's interested in that, you should check that out. It's a fantastic, life-changing book.
Wow.
That is interesting.
I'm gonna have a game in a few weeks, I think, to see if you can tell the difference. Seriously, I think it's that similar.
That's interesting. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
The games were fun. I liked those.
Andrew's little games.
Yeah. I was
Jester.
wanting to do one of like Taylor Swift versus philosophers.
Let's see if Andrew can pick out the Taylor Swift lyric.
Yeah. Yeah, because the people will do like Taylor Swift versus Shakespeare because she has some good lines in there.
I could win that 100%.
Great books. As long as we're recommending books, just real quick, there's a book called The Inner Citadel by Pierre Hadot, who was a 20th century French philosopher who wrote extensively about Marcus Aurelius. So The Inner Citadel is a very scholarly but accessible unpacking of meditation. So if meditations is something that appeals to you, that's also a great one. Along with, again, Robin Waterfield's annotated translation of meditations is also very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, speaking of things we can't control, Andrew needs to go.
I do. I'm so sorry.
That's fine. Let's wrap this thing up, shall we?
Yeah.
What a great time to once again. Can you believe it? 4 times now, Andrew. 2 for Taylor. This is great. 4 times. So anyway, thank you for tuning in and listening to us talk about, I guess, a book that has really continues to be meaningful for us. So it's funny we do it every year, but we do. Now that we've done it 4, that definitely means we have to do it 5.
I think next year should be our last year.
Uh-oh. Cut it.
Oh.
Okay.
What do you think?
I think, well, sure, why not? I don't know. Into the void it goes. But anyway, everyone, thanks for listening. We appreciate that you do.
If you like this episode, give us a good review wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on YouTube. Subscribe, hit the notification bell if you want to see our lovely faces on your screen while you listen to us. And follow us on Instagram. We post things there. Respond to DMs if you have questions or want to hear us talk about something on the show. We've done like listener inspired episodes before. Subscribe to our newsletter. There is a button on the website, which is also linked in our Instagram bio and in the description of this episode. I think that's everything from me.
Yeah.
That's it. You definitely do not want to see my face, so do not go to YouTube.
Oh, this is not true. Andrew and Taylor are two incredibly attractive people. I, on the other hand,
No.
I'm handsome in a sort of old kind of way.
In a Mustafarian sense. I don't know what that
This
means.
gray in my beard really dignifies me.
Yeah, I'm very stoic.
Very
Okay,
stoic.
enough for the jokes.
Enough
this
of the
is not our
jokes.
humor episode. We'll do a philosophy of humor episode soon, I
Oh, that'd be
think.
fun.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
Anyways,
Funny.
remember, subscribe to the newsletter. Look down below. If your life is in need of some philosophy, doors always open. Deuces.
Bye, guys.
Peace.